There's been a lot of discussion in the last few weeks about some of the controversial decisions Battlefield 6 has made. Some of these decisions and game features are completely dividing the player base, whereas some others everyone I think agrees on. Today I'm going to talk about 6 specific things that I think Battlefield 6 needs to change for the next beta. Some of this stuff DICE and EA have already acknowledged. Oh my gosh, what the heck? But these also certainly need to be fixed and addressed before the game fully releases in October. I've spent quite a bit of time playing the Battlefield 6 beta in the past week and also at the preview event last week in LA. However, I just need to preface and say I am by no means an expert at Battlefield. I definitely classify myself as more of the casual side of player, and I've played a bunch of Battlefield games throughout the years, so these are just a few things that I noticed from the casual player's point of view that I think need to be addressed before the game officially launches, so that us noobs can have a better time playing as well. Hey everyone, it's Andrew. Also, before we begin, if you're new, please subscribe. I'm probably going to make more Battlefield content, maybe, but I generally make Star Wars and Battlefront content, so if you like that as well, hit the sub button, please, and thank you. Now, this first thing that was something introduced with Battlefield 2042 has been carried over to Battlefield 6, and was a controversial decision at the time, and I still think to this day is rather controversial, and that's weapon classes. The fact any class can use any weapon, and weapons aren't limited to that specific class. Now, during the beta, Battlefield 6 did have a mode called Closed Weapon Conquest, which basically makes the game a lot similar to Battlefield 4 and the way weapon classes used to work in the older Battlefield games. So for example, the Recon class in this mode can only use the carbines, the DMRs, the sniper rifles, and the shotguns. The support can only use carbines, LMGs, DMRs, and shotguns. But the thing I noticed about this mode is that less people during the beta were playing it. More people were just playing the regular Conquest mode, where in Battlefield 6, any class can use any weapon. Now, this might not be such a big deal for the beta, but when the game actually releases, and if this is the case in Battlefield 6, where any class can use any weapon, it likely means that once the player base figures out which of all of the game's weapons are best, then most people are only going to use these weapons, and it might only be 2 or 3 of them. For example, I'm sure one of the shotguns is going to be better than the others. What was that? One of the assault rifles is going to be the best of them all. One of the sniper rifles will be the best, most powerful, most maneuverable. And once the player base figures this out, we're going to see a lot less variety in which weapons players are using, especially when weapons aren't locked to classes. I think part of what makes Battlefield such a fun, tactical, teamwork-based game is the variety in weapons, and is the fact that different classes should be using different weapons. And I'm not sure this is something that's going to be changed for launch, because it seems like most of the game is built around every class being able to use every weapon. So really, the only things that are specific to each class now are the gadgets and passive abilities. And that's part of what I think is controversial about this. Battlefield 6 is literally emphasizing a return to squad-based gameplay, a return to the class system, with so much of the marketing and branding highlighting the importance of the 4 different classes. Like, they're making a point of it. And yet, any weapon can be used by any class. It's a bit of a contradiction, which is why I think it's controversial. What do you think of this? Is this something you think they should change for the actual launch? Should weapons be locked to classes? Now, the next issue on my list that I think most players are going to agree with me about is the shotgun. During the Battlefield 6 beta, we've only had access to one shotgun, being the M87A1, and I think most players would agree it is ridiculously OP. Honestly, it works kind of how a shotgun should, and at close quarters, I fully believe that a shotgun should be a one-hit kill, but this thing even works as a one-hit at range, and you don't even necessarily need to be that accurate with it. From what I've heard though, DICE and EA have already acknowledged this and are likely going to be tweaking the shotgun for the second beta and for launch, and as much fun as it was to run around with this thing just one-shotting everyone, clearing entire rooms of enemies even while they're shooting at you, I think most players would agree this thing needs a bit of a nerf. Now, another issue I had with weapons, which was kind of a glitch, I think, but is kind of accurate to the real world, was sometimes my gun just wouldn't fire, especially after reloading, or if I was low on ammo, or if I switched the gun after using another weapon or gadget. Sometimes the gun would literally jam. I'd be pulling the trigger and nothing would be happening. This happened to me multiple times. I don't know if you guys experienced this as well, but I think there is an issue with some guns just rarely not firing, even if it does happen very sporadically. Of course, this is a beta. The game is not perfect. There are a number of things that need to be fixed before launch, which is why we're doing the beta. But certainly something where I was like, am I doing something wrong in these moments? But no, the gun just literally wasn't working. Now, one of the biggest points of discussion I've seen for Battlefield 6 is the argument for a server browser. And apparently Battlefield 6 is going to have a server browser when it launches, but it won't be necessarily in the way that you think. I think DICE are still exploring where and how the server browser is going to work, but based on what I've heard, the server browser is going to be integrated into Battlefield Portal, which is essentially the user-made game modes. Battlefield 6 is offering more user customization and user modes than any Battlefields that came before, and part of this is going to be included as a server browser where players can create their own server and have people playing on their server and on their map rotation. The problem here though is that a lot of players are arguing and fighting for persistent servers. Basically servers that they can create and then never get taken down. Ones that run 24/7. And this, for example, in Battlefield 4 was an integral part of the online community. Players could load up Battlefield, see that the same server that they played in years ago is still running, and that the same players might potentially even be joining that server. Having persistent servers is a great way to foster that community, to keep players coming back to the same place, to potentially even make friends and see some familiar faces. And this is just one reason why Battlefield 6 also needs a server browser. The other most important reason, I think, is map rotation. I personally found it frustrating during the Battlefield 6 beta, even though there were only a handful of maps available to play, that game after game I was joining the same map. There's no way for me to select what map I wanted to play, and a server browser fixes this issue by being able to see what you're loading into before you even decide to load into it. I think allows you to explore more of the game, have a better time, have a more diverse experience, and not get stuck on the same maps over and over again using the quick join function. The server browser has been such an integral part of Battlefield's DNA for years and years, for as long as I can remember, and it would be weird to get a Battlefield that feels like it's returning to the franchise's roots and doesn't have a server browser, doesn't have this as a feature. There are other potential corporate reasons why EA and DICE don't want to do it in the traditional sense. Part of that could potentially be due to skill-based matchmaking, that with the server browser this doesn't really exist, and potentially also that by having a server browser, players are more likely to play the same thing over and over again and potentially not purchase future DLCs and new Battlefield games because they're happy to just play the older one. In some ways, having a server browser also leans more towards the hardcore players who can join the same server over and over again and then dominate newer players who are joining. I mean, this is going to happen anyway. But let's just hope that they listen to the player base and we get the server browser we want, just like the old Battlefields. Now, another thing that I think needs to be addressed before the next beta or for the launch of Battlefield 6 is spawn locations. Some of the spawns I was getting were ridiculous. And I know this is a hard thing to perhaps navigate for especially a conquest style game mode where there are players all over the map from both teams. There were so many times where I'd spawn on the objective, not even on my squad, and just be gunned down straight away, or there'd be a tank or something like that right in front of me. This is something I'm assuming will be tweaked and improved. Some of these I'm sure are just bad luck, but also at times it just felt more frustrating than it needed to be, spawning in like the most awful spot ever, even though you were just spawning on an objective. Did you guys experience this as well? Did you have bad spawns? Let me know what you thought.
Can you not?
Oh my god.
And if there's anything else you think needs to be changed and fixed for the Battlefield 6 launch, anything you don't like about Battlefield 6, please let me know in the comments. I'd love to read, love to see your opinions on the game. I'm probably going to play more of the beta on the weekend, so I hope to see you on the battlefield. And I've also posted some more Battlefield content on Instagram, and there's some more stuff from the event I went to there if you want to come check that out, at Stay Bombastic. Watch this video for more, and thanks for watching this. Always remember,
Stay bombastic.